Hey everyone, here's another video about the great Joe Jones, and in this video I want to talk about some of the wonderful sounds and effects that Joe Jones would get playing with the snares turned off on the snare drum. And of course he would do that in solos. Joe Jones would play some amazing solos with the snares off and get all kinds of tom-tom effects, and that's a thing that is not really uncommon. You hear a lot of drummers do that. A lot of my favorite drummers would do that. Nick Fatul, Ray Baduke, Jimmy Crawford, Sid Catlett, Gene Krupa sometimes. You'll hear drummers play wonderful solos with the snares off, but something that Joe Jones did that has been very influential for me, and is something that I don't hear a lot of other drummers do, he would play time in a band quite often with the snares off. And so I just want to talk about a few of the ways he would do that. And probably the most well-known way he would do it, Joe Jones was pretty famous for playing brushes with the snares off. And this is something that really set him apart from a lot of other drummers. Most of my favorite drummers play brushes with the snares on. Again, Gene Krupa, George Wettling, Sid Catlett, Dave Tuff, Jimmy Crawford. My favorite brush players, they almost always have the snares on, and Joe Jones was just the opposite. He almost always had the snares off when he played brushes. And if you've never played brushes with the snares off, I recommend checking it out. It's just a very different, nice sound. So, snares on. Snares off. To me, with the snares off, it's a warmer, more mellow sound. With the snares on, it has a little more of a sharp attack. So you can hear Joe Jones do this most of the time when you hear him play brushes. It's with the snares off. The great trio recordings he did with Ray Bryant and Tommy Bryant, you hear a lot of great brush playing with the snares off. Also a recording I really love, a trio recording with Teddy Wilson and Gene Ramey. The album's called I Got Rhythm. Wonderful brush playing with the snares off. And for me, for whatever it's worth, I play probably half the time with brushes with the snares on and half the time with the snares off. I like both sounds, and it just sort of depends on the room I'm in, what sounds good in the room, who I'm playing with. Sometimes the tune will suggest one approach or the other. I'll often go back and forth with the snares on or off, even during the same gig. And with all of this stuff, you know, it's nice that we don't have to decide beforehand. You don't need to say, well, I play brushes with the snares on, or I play brushes with the snares off, like Joe Jones. You can be open to being in the moment and just doing what works. And that's another great lesson that I get from these drummers like Joe Jones. They always sound in the moment and open to doing what works for the music right then. And I know for myself, anytime I go to a gig with a preconception about how I'm going to play, well, this is how I do it, it's never as good. I think it's always better to try to be a blank slate and just do what works then, even if it's the opposite of what you normally do. So there's a little bit of philosophy, but that is definitely something I get from these great players, whether it's Joe Jones, Gene Krupa, Sid Catlett, George Wettling. They all sound different, but it really comes across to me that they're in the moment and they're not just relying on preconceived things. Okay, so playing brushes with the snares off, that is a way that Joe Jones has influenced other drummers a lot. You will hear other jazz drummers after him play brushes with the snares off. But some of the ways that Joe Jones played in a band with the snares off that I feel have not been picked up on as much by other drummers are the ways he would play time with sticks in a band, but with the snares off. This is something I really love, and again, this really sets Joe Jones apart from a lot of other drummers. So, a couple of ways he would do this. The first one is sometimes he would just play the way he normally would, not changing anything, but just with the snares off, and it's a unique sound. So, different kind of effect. And it's so funny how just a little change like that, just flicking this lever, not changing anything else, can have such a difference for the music. And often what you'll hear Joe Jones do when he does this, he'll start the tune with the snares off and play. It might just be for a chorus, it might be for a lot of the tune, but usually by the end, he'll turn the snares back on. And I think that was a brilliant way to sort of build things. Again, with the snares on, there's sort of more of an attack, so it makes sense to build that way from snares off to snares on. And just again, it's the genius of Joe Jones, just coloring the music in that way. And when we think of all the ways that as drummers we can change the texture and color the music and build things, whether it's going from brushes to sticks or from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal, these are things we all do. Here's Joe Jones changing the texture, just going from snares off to snares on. It's a wonderful effect that I just don't hear a lot. So some of the recordings you can hear Joe Jones doing this on. Recording I mentioned in the last video about Joe Jones, Duke Ellington and Johnny Hodges side by side. You'll hear him do it on that album, the first tune, Stompy Jones. You can hear him play some of it with the snares off. Also, if memory serves, I know he does it on some of the Buck Clayton jam session recordings. All of those are highly recommended, incredible stuff. I think How High the Fi, he starts with the snares off. Some of the recordings with Paul Quinachet in the 50s, which are also great. The album Basie Reunion, I know he does it there. I think on Love Jumped Out, he starts with the snares off. But it's just a great thing to experiment with. And when you listen and hear Joe Jones do it, you'll hear it just has such a different sound. And again, he's not doing anything different except playing with the snares off in the band with sticks, something you just don't hear often, or I don't anyway. So one final way that Joe Jones would play with the snares off in a band, it's similar to that last example, but this is something that I used to hear and I was never quite sure what he was doing. He was playing with the snares off with sticks, but something was a little different, and I could never figure it out until I saw Eddie Locke do it. And Eddie Locke was a great drummer who was a protege of Joe Jones and spent a lot of time with Joe Jones. And I was very lucky that I got to hear Eddie Locke play many times, got to know him, take a lesson from him. Great guy and a great drummer. And the thing that Eddie showed me that he got from Joe Jones was laying the stick across the head as if you were going to play on the rim, play a cross stick, but not going as far as the rim, maybe an inch or so from the rim, and playing on the head. That sound. That's another great effect that Joe Jones would get with the snares off that I haven't heard anyone else do. Eddie Locke is the only drummer I've ever seen do that in person, and the only person I've heard play it other than him is Joe Jones, who he got it from. If any of you ever play that way or have seen other drummers do it, I'd be interested to know. But that's just another great effect that Joe Jones got with the snares off that I've always loved. And trying to think, I think again on those trio recordings with Ray Bryant and Tommy Bryant, Cubano Chant, if I recall, you can hear him use that sound on parts of that tune. But these are all just wonderful effects that I think deserve to be explored a little more. They just show the creativity of Joe Jones, and I think they can inspire us to mess around with things and come up with some of these different sounds, or just change one little thing and see what effect it has. I think it's just brilliant stuff. So I hope this was enjoyable. I just wanted to draw your attention to just some of these things that I really love about Joe Jones, and thank you for watching. I will be back soon.